Welcome to this week's episode of the Inside Kingston podcast, where experienced professionals, entrepreneurs, and community leaders based in Kingston upon Thames are invited on to share their story with us. I'm your host, Amir Rocha-Lima.
This week's episode of the Inside Kingston podcast is brought to you by Holland Harnham Wills, a financial planning and wealth management firm based in Kingston upon Thames. Holland Harnham Wills specialises in retirement planning for senior professionals and successful business owners. Visit hhw-uk.com to start feeling more relaxed and confident about your financial future.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Inside Kingston podcast. I'm joined today by Anna Chaudhry. Anna is the owner of Surbiton Tutor, offering private tuition for pupils in Key Stage 1 to Key Stage 4. What's unique about Anna is her emphasis on the importance of family engagement in education and her methodology of encouraging students to build their ability and fluency in a subject through small, manageable steps. And be sure to listen to the end, where Anna shares with us how she's inspired to continue to support children to achieve a safe, strong, and successful life. So whether you're interested in knowing more about the world of private tutors, or would like to know more about what it takes to run a successful independent business, then I hope you enjoy this episode of the Inside Kingston podcast. Welcome, Anna Chaudhry, to the Inside Kingston podcast. Anna, I'm really excited about this conversation because, well, as the father of two young children myself, the eldest of which is still only in reception, I'm really keen to learn more about your thoughts on encouraging and inspiring them to be successful lifelong learners. And I think that myself and our listeners can learn a lot from your experience in this area. But before we kick off this conversation, I'd like to go back in time, if that's okay. So Anna, where did you grow up?
Okay, well, thank you for having me. I'm actually what they call a Kingstonian. Oh, so wow. Let's go back 29 years. I was born in Kingston Hospital. My mum was born in Kingston Hospital. So my family history is, some of it stems from Kingston. We're very familiar with the area. We've got friends around. I went to my primary school, my secondary school were also local. And so for me, this is very much home. This is my safety net also. And I've built some great relationships, friends, families, colleagues. So I will always bump into someone I know when I'm out and about.
Oh, that's very cool. And what did you study after secondary school?
So when I went on to uni, I began a degree in English literature. Wow. Mainly because of my love of books. I used to love to read, and I hadn't quite yet secured an idea of where exactly I wanted to go. And so for me, that was like a degree that was quite open. I could go to many areas after that. And it was very skills-based. So learning a lot about how to write, how to read, and just learning a lot about our culture as well, with the many texts that were studied, like Shakespeare, and there was lots of historical elements to it. So it was all for me a really knowledge-based degree, and something that really just fulfilled my interests, rather than a course that defined my career at the time.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. And could you tell us a little bit about your career journey before you set up your business?
So after I'd left university, I actually started as a teaching assistant to a group of teachers who were my greatest role models. Wow. And who I had the most fantastic opportunity later to actually be a practicing teacher alongside them. So I started off as an assistant, and I had lots of opportunities to support children in smaller groups. So I do lots of core work. These could be children with special educational needs and learning difficulties. There was lots of children as well who had English as an additional language. And I think my greatest, I would say what I'm really grateful for, I was trusted. I was very grateful to be trusted to plan and to prepare for those children. And that allowed me to get to know the children at a much more deeper level, understand their needs and how I could encourage their progress, and so that they were able to sustain that progress. And especially encourage positivity. And that's kind of been my ethos through teaching, having children be really positive about their learning experience. And so that's how it all began. I was just an assistant. And then I went back to uni and I said, I want to be a teacher and I wanted to be like my role models. And I was very grateful and fortunate again to get an opportunity as a teacher at the very same school.
Wow.
So I came back. And what's really interesting is the very first classroom that I walked into as a teaching assistant, little did I know that 2 years later, that was my very first classroom as a teacher.
Oh, wow.
So it was so strange because I had my deputy head teacher and I remember the day she walked me over to this year 5 classroom. And there I was, and I didn't know exactly what to do. And I had a wonderful teacher at the time who was working in there, and he was directing me and was supporting me. And how life works, that 2 years later, I was actually doing the displays in that classroom. That was my classroom. It actually said Miss Chowdhury outside of the door.
Very cool.
It's funny how fate works.
It is. It's really interesting. And, you mentioned something else that for me is just super, super interesting and definitely a thread I want to pull with you throughout this conversation. This business of trying to help children be positive about their learning. And it goes without saying that over these roughly 15 months that we've gone through the ins and outs of lockdown here in the UK, myself and other parents have had to figure that out to a certain extent on their own, not from lack of support from schools or anything like that, just the actual doing of the teaching during homeschooling. And as I mentioned, my eldest daughter's she's only at reception, so there isn't that much learning, but the learning that is there, I very quickly figured out that it was all about trying to create a positive environment for her to try those things out, be it the math exercises or be it the reading exercises or the writing exercises. Without that positivity, Anna, I was hitting a brick wall really quickly, my wife and I. And it was a bit of a blessing really that we just saw that and we thought, actually, no, let's take this easy, take a step back. Let's make the finding the curiosity of it the thing to chase. And then it will be fun for her to do the exercises. And thankfully, she's really just thrived in that sense. But I wonder, Anna, because you've had those different experiences at those different levels at a sort of teacher as a career role, what inspired you to become a private tutor?
Okay, so I think for me, my greatest inspiration was when I was in the US. So I had taken 2 years out of teaching, actually. So once I was teaching for a couple of years, and then I took a short break. And I went to a university in the USA, and I began learning about the impact of family engagement in education.
Wow.
How important it was to bring parents and families and carers on and get them involved in the learning, because there was an impact on the progress that the children were making if they were involved. And then along came COVID. And I found that pre-COVID, our education system was fantastic. You would see in schools that a lot of, there was a promotion almost of mindfulness, of mental health, alongside learning. So children were encouraged to have positive relationships with one another, to talk. Education was becoming more creative. It was becoming practical. And then lockdown came, COVID came. And because of the restrictions that were in place, I saw that we were falling back into what was kind of like the Industrial Revolution model of education. This is what you have to teach. This is what you have to remember. and that is it. Because I found that lots of practitioners were getting into a panic. They were getting into a panic that, and families equally, oh no, we're about to miss out. And now we call it the catch-up curriculum as well. We want our children to catch up. But if you want a child to catch up, you want them also not to lose the love of learning. And I think alongside home learning, we lost mindfulness. We lost those opportunities to build the personal, social, healthy relationships. And so for me, through private tuition, it was to support families to help children catch up, but also to make sure that they enjoy learning, to bring my resources along with me, because I can't expect families at home to have base 10, for example, or counters. We can make the most of it out of cereal and drawing pictures, but there are certain things that teachers have that families don't have. And so it was that I needed to bring into homes as safely as possible and to make it accessible, because there are lots and lots of families who want the extra support but don't know how to approach the conversation and may not be able to afford tuition. I think that was especially my one of my biggest driving forces. I looked around, and to tutor in London, you're looking at approximately £45 to £50 an hour. It's extortionate. And I thought that it's unacceptable almost, because education is something that we should all have the right to. And we need to make it accessible for families, and they want the best for their children. And as a teacher, I want the best for their children too. So how am I practicing being a teacher to the best of my ability if I'm not making it accessible? And so considering COVID, and, we've all been in slight pickle financially, perhaps, that's what really drove me forward with this. And I'm now in a position where I'm really fortunate. I have about 11 or 12 children on my registers who I all know really, really well. And we use pictures, we use resources, we're going out for walks. One-to-one tuition, again, we're so now used to, because of home learning, looking at a screen. We forget that in class, we're going out and about. We take learning maybe outdoors. It might be a trip. It might be watching videos. And it's using that experience of mine and supporting families on how to do that at home too. So that they may not necessarily have to be tutored by me for a long period of time, but I've given families and children that confidence and those skills to use.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I think that speaks volumes to this concept that you went to study in the US, which is incorporating or encouraging family engagement in education. And I wouldn't mind picking your brains on that slightly further, Anna. What was that learning all about for you? Like, what is it that you picked up there? Some of which might, when you say it, seem common sense, but some of which maybe surprised even you, and that now you're passionate about sharing with other people.
Yeah, there is undeniably, this research is growing, particularly in the US. It's a fairly new point of research, but with the evidence that has surfaced so far, the impact of when parents are on board. For example, maybe perhaps just doing small things, encouraging children to hand in their homework, complete it. How that child's progress accelerates at school is unbelievable, because they've been given the practice to complete homework. They've been given the practice to go the extra mile. Because of their role models at home, their progress at school is accelerating. Also giving from another personal experience as well, using what I learned from the US and also in my teaching practice, those children who spend a little time at home reading a little bit more, spend some time at home doing a few of those practice books that parents might have bought, or parents might have even borrowed, even asking me for maybe a couple of extra worksheets. And me being able to approach parents and saying, we explored this concept today. Your son or daughter might not have grasped the concept totally. I'm going to send this sheet home. If you could both talk about it. Sometimes the environment, a change of person as well, can have a great impact on the child. So I think we need to, as parents, set a good example and be good role models for our children and show that diligence, even from an early age, will have a great impact. The more you put in, the greater that will come out. Yeah. And so that was what it was for me. And it was so very clear, those parents who were even just bringing children into school because attendance equates to progress. That engagement in itself was such a huge thing because it was so important. If they were missing periods of school, they were missing chunks of learning. And then they would be coming back not understanding and missing out, and that would affect their self-confidence. And it's like a domino effect. And so small things, they all add up to making a child a happy, healthy child who wants to learn.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And you know what, Anna, it's so fascinating because what I've learned through these, I don't know, almost 90 or over 90 conversations on the podcast already, almost 100 conversations, is that every single field, the different professionals from different fields, has a similar problem to the one you've just described in learning, which is the information we mainly get out there from the mass media is very, very noisy. And what we all forget to do is seek to understand the basics and actually, in a disciplined way, deliver on the basics. In my field, financial services, financial planning in particular, it is rife with noisy information, and people, they chase that noise and they forget to do the basics consistently. And I really appreciate you sharing that with us because it was what you mentioned. There are basic things that parents should be able to do. We can't forget them, though. We need to be implementing those in a disciplined way with our children in our households, because, as you said, it definitely adds up. So that's really interesting. Are there any other tips that you'd give to our listeners that you think could help them in supporting their children to achieve a sort of a safe, a strong, a successful learning life?
Yeah, I would. My greatest piece of advice would be have an open dialogue with your child's teacher. Have an open dialogue with your child too. What is it that they find difficult? What is it that they find really actually quite easy? Because we've entered an age where we are developing, we're introducing mastery, so that we're not just moving children on to the next step once they've grasped it, but we want them to understand that concept at a deeper level. And in primary and secondary schools, we call it mastery. And so challenging your children is so important. It's then encouraging their perseverance and their resilience. But if you have that open dialogue with their teacher and with them, you will feel more confident to know which direction their learning is going in, and also to know you as a person, how you can help and support them. And you need to, it's a relationship, teacher, child, parent. It's a triangle that needs to work and flow. Yeah. And so the most important thing is communication, because we are here as teachers, and me myself working currently in a primary school, I'm here to teach the children, but I'm here to support families, and that part of my role is not always quite obvious. And not always known by parents. So approach us. We are here to support you, even if it's in terms of behaviour, if it's not just the learning. That is what we are here for. And we love these open discussions, because I think our greatest joy is when we see that child who's entered in reception, and we see that same child who leaves in year 6, and do you remember that one? And it's amazing to see the progress that they've made, whether it's just as a person or even their handwriting, how, when it starts off all big and beautiful, but becomes so eloquent and, fluent in pen. So, we want to talk to parents. And I'm very fortunate to be part of a school, and I know there are lots of other primary schools in the borough who have parent councils, who have maybe coffee mornings as well. And we encourage you to attend those. Yeah. The higher the attendance, the greater. Come to those, ask questions, understand how your school works, understand how your child's day works and what they've been learning. Yeah. Because sometimes it is very easy to fall into a trap of, okay, I'm going to send you off to school and you're going to come back. And when you ask a child, what did you do today? Most common answer is, I don't remember, But if you know what they've been doing, perhaps you can ask a more sort of specific question, oh, I know you're looking at this text in English. Tell me a little bit more about it. Yeah. Or, for example, I know you've been learning about photosynthesis in science. Tell me more about it. Those questions will start a conversation.
Yeah, those are great tips, and I appreciate you sharing that, Anna. And also, I think what you mentioned there about families having to sort of make do with whatever tools they had during this lockdown period. There's something else that I think parents, most definitely my wife and I, fall into this category. We realize that we're not, and we've always known this, of course, but this was a physical realization that we're not trained to teach like teachers are trained to teach. We don't have the mental models even to be able to do that. And I'm sure you have found this already now that kids are thankfully back at school. There hopefully is, at least I can tell you from my side, there definitely is a newfound appreciation for having teachers in our children's lives, and also teachers that embody the spirit that you embody, which is that want the family to be involved in the children's education and the children's schooling as well. I think that's beautiful. And I for one, and I speak with many people who also share the same sentiment. I've got a newfound energy towards really wanting my children to be successfully curious and successful at wanting to learn. What that then becomes is almost out of my control, but that feeling is what I'm keen to ensure is established in them. And the tips you mentioned there go a long way towards helping that. Anna, could you tell us a little bit about your private tutoring business today?
Yeah, so as it currently stands, I do have just over 10 children on my register, all ranging from different ages. So Key Stage 1, actually all the way up to Key Stage 4. My Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4 children are very subject specific, where English is my speciality. But my Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 children, they're all local in the borough. I spend time with them. It varies. Some parents ask for me to do 2 hours. Some parents ask for me to do 1 hour. But it will be very practical. Often I start with a baseline assessment. So I have an idea of what gaps there are in this particular student's learning. And then I will plan from there. I take a very similar approach as I do in my full-time job, where I prepare a plan and I share that plan with parents and we go forward from there. I will, again, just as I do at school, divide my lesson. So I've got a quick starting activity, then I've got a main activity, a consolidation, and then a review. So it's a very clear structure in how I'm tutoring that particular student. And we will maintain that. So every next lesson, we'll do a little recap and we'll learn a new skill, or we will develop on that skill. In terms of following up, I know some families are very keen on homework and others prefer not to because they might be receiving homework from school, but I'm very flexible in that, where I work with the family and what they are capable of sort of sustaining. If they don't want any homework, that's okay. Because I appreciate that we've all got other responsibilities and we've all got other priorities too. So I work very much with my family, what their needs are and what their child's needs are, and building a plan on that. And as I had mentioned before, because of that impact with the families engaging, that's why it's so important for me to have that time with parents or carers at the end of a lesson, explaining to them what we've gone through. And that's something I stick by because I know it's sometimes easy just to pack up and leave, but it's really important that both child and parent know that what has been taught in that particular session.
That's really, really interesting. Anna, throughout your career, what are some of the key lessons that you've learned that you think are important to share with our listeners today?
One of the most important lessons that I have learned, and which is very important to my practice today, is to be honest. To be honest. Mistakes happen. And as a practitioner, both as a tutor and a teacher, I'm teaching somewhat 40 odd children. And it's so important to, and I say this to parents as well, to take time out for yourself. And equally, a child needs to take out time for themselves. If you think about it, a child has been at school from 9 till 3:30. It's a long day. It's a really long day. And you might be learning, you have playtimes and lunchtimes, but mentally there is so much going on, you feel drained. And so I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned is to take time out for myself, to encourage parents to take time out for themselves, and also to appreciate the amount of work that a child puts in. We often speak about, starting our careers maybe at our 20s. Our full-time job might start in our 20s. A child has a full-time job. They're going to school and they start that at 5 years old. It's a lot. So we need to appreciate the amount of work that they do.
Yeah.
And for me, I think that's just been my lesson, communication, honesty, taking time out for yourself. And I think that's the underlying ethos of my tuition as well, encouraging that positivity, encouraging that healthy mindset. Because if you are positive and you are feeling ready, then you will develop an independence and this willingness to learn.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you will carry that on throughout. So yeah, that's what I've learned.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
And sometimes it does get too much. I mean, sometimes it does all build up, and we're trying to meet deadlines, and I appreciate that from many of my older students as well in Key Stage 4, who are trying to complete coursework, and they've got an exam next week, and we just need to appreciate one another and understand one another.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And that, again, that understanding of just maybe where that child is at that point, when I see a bit of frustration in any of my kids, instead of combating that directly, I've found that it's easier for me to try to get where they're coming from with that, because it might be that they just need a snack and a bit of time out, it's sometimes it's that straightforward. And you're right, sometimes it isn't, but usually it really is that straightforward.
Exactly. It completely is that. And even when I'm tutoring, I kind of have this plan in my head, we're going to start with this. This is then going to be our activity, and we're going to finish with this. And then halfway through the activity, I recognize that actually, perhaps this is a little bit tricky for my student, and they're becoming frustrated. And that's another lesson that I've learned, that some of the best practitioners, they change the course of their lessons. Where you might have initially been heading, you have to change a different course. We might get up for a movement break. We might just say, let's get coffee. Let's chat about something else. What are your plans for the weekend? You just need to take them away from that and then draw them back in. It could be through a different route. It might just be revisiting it the next week.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. When you look back at your career journey to date, what are you most proud of?
I think there are a lot of things that I'm proud of. It would be very hard for me to choose one. And I'm going to do it without getting emotional. I'm very, very grateful. And I suppose this links back to, that family engagement, the effort that my parents have put into me, and probably what they've had to put up with, to be fair, for the past 29 years. But the effort that they have put into me. And I've been through, I think, what somewhat might seem straightforward. Came out of uni, I became a teaching assistant, went on to become a teacher. I've got some great responsibilities at my current place of work, which I really appreciate. It's just this sort of standard linear career progression. But I think as a person, I have faced a lot of difficulties, lots of challenges, I should say. As a person, I faced many challenges, and I'm grateful to both my parents, who have put a lot of time and effort into me, and supported me in the things that I wanted to do. And I couldn't say any more on that. That's really nice. I think it was very hard for me initially to leave the UK and to go to the US. And I did that to initially support my parents. I was then very fortunate to get the opportunity to study and find my feet again. But I think that family unit and just having people to talk to was really important for me. Yeah. And I survived. We all feel swamped under work one day, or we're all feeling a little bit like today's not our day. And I survived, and I know that there are so many other people out there surviving. And so that's why I always say to myself, communication and honesty. You will pull through. We all do in the end.
Yeah, I like that a lot, and definitely values that I try to embody in my own life. So definitely appreciate you sharing that. What next for you and your business? Are there any projects in the pipeline that you can tell us about?
I think I really enjoy being a teacher. I enjoy the daily challenges. I enjoy not knowing what's coming next. And that's in my job as a teacher, currently in a primary school. And as a tutor, again, I am equally presented with those challenges. I don't know what's going to happen next. I sometimes quite enjoy the fact that maybe if a child is finding something challenging, how can we, approach it from a different way? I suppose in the future, I would love to do my tuition full time, because I love teaching the range of children all the way from Key Stage 1 up to Key Stage 4. And I would, in the future, like to introduce some of those pupils from different schools and have smaller classes and do things together in groups. So that is what I'm currently looking at. And I've just started it with a few of my families, where I've introduced parents to one another. And I know that these particular children have some objectives that they both need to meet, and we can do group work. Not only have they made a new friend, which has encouraged, more positive relationships, but sometimes when you're doing things with a friend, it just makes it more fun. And what I often found was when a friend was explaining something to me, I actually understood it instead of when a teacher was explaining it to me. It's just those different dynamics. So I want more of those. I want to find more opportunities to do group work. So yeah.
Very cool. Exciting times ahead.
Exciting times ahead, definitely.
Excellent.
Definitely.
As we start to wrap up, I'd like to ask you a few quick fire questions that our listeners are always interested in. So Anna, what do you do to relax outside of the office?
What do I do to relax outside the office? I must admit, actually, a good friend of mine is almost a film fanatic. And I was more of a bookworm growing up. And so recently I found myself watching some incredible movies, international movies, art films, some classics. So at the moment, that is what I'm on. I just watched Goodfellas. Apparently I was really late to the game.
Very good.
But it was brilliant.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's what I've been enjoying at the moment.
And are there any books that you've either recently read or that you've always enjoyed that you would recommend to our listeners?
Oh, yes. Because I'm a bookworm, I, of course, have a book subscription. So I have a surprise book that gets delivered to me every month. Some of my favorite books at the moment are, I would recommend Where the Crawdads Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. Great book. And I would also recommend Such a Fun Age by, I believe it's Kylie Reid, who both books actually great positive role models, really strong female leads. So I'm really into those books at the moment.
Yeah, very cool. And finally, where can people go to find out more about you and your business?
So to find out more about Surbiton Tutor, which is the name that I work under, you can find me on Instagram under Surbiton Tutor. And that is where I have all my information. You can DM me on Instagram. And also I have left up there an email address and phone number that you can contact me on.
Excellent. And for the benefit of our listeners, I'll make sure that I add that link to the show notes. Anna, thank you for joining us here on the Inside Kingston podcast. It's been a pleasure getting to know your story.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a wonderful opportunity to speak to you. Thank you.
That wraps up another episode of the Inside Kingston podcast. Make sure to check out our guests' website, pay them a visit, and help spread the word about what they're doing. If you have any questions or know someone who should be a guest on the show, please feel free to get in touch. I would also love it if you could go to iTunes and leave us a review and a 5-star rating. We work hard to bring on some great guests, and getting a review from you is one way to help the podcast rate well on iTunes so that others can find and enjoy the show too. Thanks for listening.